Hi, this is Marsha.
And this is Kelly.
We are the 2U's of 2U's Fiber Adventures. Thanks for stopping by.
You'll hear about knitting, spinning, dyeing, crocheting, and just about anything else we can think of as a way to play with string.
We blog and post show notes at 2usfiberadventures.com.
And we invite you to join our 2U's Fiber Adventures group on Ravelry. I'm 100 Projects.
And I am Better in Motion.
We're both on Instagram and Ravelry, and we look forward to meeting you there.
Enjoy the episode. Good morning, Kelly.
Good morning, Marsha.
How are you doing?
I'm doing all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're halfway through the semester, or maybe a little more than halfway through the semester. I'm halfway through my class, and it was only a short course, a 14-week course. So I think that means we're more than halfway through the semester, which is good because I'm not enjoying it.
You didn't, when you became a teacher a few years ago, I won't say how many, but a few years ago.
No, I will say, because I'm very proud, almost 33 years.
Yeah. You did not become a teacher to do online teaching.
No, and we don't have to get into a whole discussion about education, but it's really put me in sort of an existential crisis in a way. That sounds weird, but it's made me think a lot about what I thought about teaching and what I thought I was doing, because really, why do I need to be there in front of the students? Right? The learning is going on inside of their head. They're the ones who have to engage with the material and do the work to learn. I'm there to help and guide. And so if all I'm there to do is help and guide, which I do believe, why is my actual physical presence in a room with them important? Yeah. So it's really made me think about, do I like teaching so much because I like performing? I don't think that's true.
I don't think that, well, it's funny. I would not say that about you, but knowing you the way I know you, but I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's made me doubt is not the right word. It's made me really question what I thought I was good at. I feel like learning is happening when I'm in front of a group of students in the classroom, but I also really know scientifically that's not when the learning happens. And so why do I think my actual physical person is so important?
Because you have an inflated sense of your own importance.
Well, this has been the 33 years of doing something, thinking that you're effective, and then all of a sudden you think, well, was I really effective, or did I just fool myself into thinking I was effective? Because I should be just as effective if all I was doing was guiding and helping people do the work on their own that it takes to learn. I should be just as effective when I'm, coming through the online world. So anyway, it's created a lot of questioning of myself and my career, and this is the stuff you do when you're young, not when you've been in a career for 33 years.
Well, I have to tell you, along those lines, Ben is taking, of course, everything is online, and so he's doing a psychology class and also a math class. I think it's calculus. I think anyway, he's having to get all of these done because he's going to be finished with school this quarter, and then he's transferring, and so it's important that he keep his grades up too, and he needs this class, and so it's all very important. But now, of course, it's online, and it's just difficult for him. He would prefer to have it, in person. That's not going to happen, and so he's really struggling. And I said to him, maybe because you were doing this remotely, why don't you just go down and stay with Kelly and Robert, and she could coach you, tutor you through the this class because you don't have any students like physically in front of you, and he could physically be in front of you, and it might like help both of you out. You know?
That's right. Yes.
It's not happening, Kelly. I'm not saying he's not going down there, but it was like kind of an idea I had, you know.
Mm-hmm. No, that kind of makes sense. I have this gaping hole in my life, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So and again, it's like who's benefiting? Like who am I doing this for? Right? Myself or my students? I don't know. It's just, it's it's like I'm the one that has the gaping hole, you know, and I do think some of the difference, because I know online teaching works. I know you can have very good success rates because a lot of our programs at Hartnell really do. The California Community College system has standards for online education, and they're high. But the difference is that those are not just teachers who are skilled at teaching online. They are students who choose to learn online. And I think that might be part of the difference that I'm seeing. You know, yeah. So anyway, it's just when I think about the hole in my life, it's like, but wait a minute, isn't what I'm doing not for me? You know, I have an inflated sense of my.
Well, I guess the other thing is that, you know, work, our careers, we pick them because we like the career, right? So it has to be something for you too.
Yeah, I guess something out of it. Yes.
Yeah, I would say there's nothing wrong. There's I don't think you're saying it's wrong, but I was going to say there's nothing wrong with doing a career that you get something out of,
right? Perhaps
more than your students. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with it, you know?
Yeah, why would I do it if it wasn't reinforcing for me? Yeah,
right.
That's exactly true.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to, at this point, be thrown into a situation where you're just like questioning a lot, like things that you thought you knew about yourself, about the strategies you use, about the things you thought were really successful and the reasons you thought they were successful. Anyway, very interesting.
Yeah.
And not so much fun.
I would say I think that the pandemic has made a lot of people question every aspect of their lives, you know. Yeah.
And I think I've mentioned this before, that the other thing is like being a beginner, you know, being a novice at something. And like with beekeeping, it was hard, but it was exciting, you know, that I was doing something that was hard and that it was new and I didn't know how to do well. But with this, it's not fun to be feeling like you're not doing as well as you want to do, and that it's really hard. And I guess it's because you know, I've been doing it for so long. Feeling like a beginner at the job you've been doing is not fun. So, but I mean, as an educator, I should be embracing that, right?
Yeah, Kelly.
I keep telling myself that. Just think of how much you're learning about learning. Yeah. It's not fun.
Well, it's like I always say, you know, I love change when I'm forced to do it.
Oh, that's good. I like that. I like that. Oh my gosh.
Anyway, well, should we talk about knitting?
Yes, let's do it. Oh, I have to mention this though. I got a message on Instagram from a listener who said that we faked her out. We started talking about the knitting in the last episode, and she was like, "Oh wow, I can't believe I'm like 12 or 15 minutes into my workout. That's really cool." And then she looked at the clock and she saw that we were talking knitting after only about 7 or 8 minutes.
Oh. Well, actually, I'm going to go back. Actually, I am going to delay now in talking about knitting for a minute. I just wanted to ask you about your all your projects, your painting projects. Are they done?
Yes, the painting is finished, and it's beautiful. It really looks nice. I love that color blue. It's the color of blue in the living room, so it's not like we didn't have that color in the house before. And the the studio. Well, let me just describe it. So our house, it's kind of a rectangle. In the middle is the entryway, and on either side, it's kind of symmetrical. Only on the left-hand side, you have the living room, and on the right-hand side, that same section of the house is divided up into the dining room and the kitchen, and so it's kind of this symmetrical thing. And then on one side of the house, we have this covered, the porte cochere, covered driveway part of the house where it kind of sticks out. And on the other side, it sticks out. And that part that sticks out from the living room is what I'm using as my studio. From what I'm told, the original owners had musical instruments, and this was like the music room. And then the next owners who had it actually had their stereo system in one of the cabinets, and speakers. We found speaker wire going behind the molding, and so it was also in that case used for music. Mm-hmm. I don't have any pictures or anything like that of what it looked like at that time, but so it's this little octagonal kind of room off the edge of the living room. So it's the same color as the living room. That's my long story. Mm-hmm. Long story short, it's just really off of the living room. And so it's the same color as the living room. And then there's a door from there out to the yard, which is really exciting to me. Anyone who was listening 3 years ago would remember that I had gotten rid of a whole bunch of stuff, taken down all the shelves. Robert had taken down the shelves, the molding, the wainscoting, the cabinetry, and put it back to the way it was, because they had put bookcases and cabinets over the top of the door and the window.
Yeah.
And they built.
Yeah. So when you're outside, you could look in the windows and see the back of the bookcases.
Well, they had left the shutters on and everything. Mm-hmm. They just kept the shutters on the windows, and they did have to take the interior detail molding off the door panels, so that the door would be flat and they could put the bookcase up against it. But yeah, it's
lucky for you that they just covered them up, so you didn't have to, you had to have the windows, I'm sure, repaired and rebuilt, but you didn't have to get all new windows, Yeah.
Yeah.
And less demo too.
It was really just easy to take everything down. And then there was a big hole in the wallboard. Well, actually, probably there never was wallboard there, where originally a bookcase had been. Mm-hmm. And so when we took down the bookshelves, we exposed the studs in this one area where the bookcase had been. The original bookcase had been. And the reason we know there was probably a bookcase there, besides the fact that there's no flooring and there was no wallboard, is that there was an outlet up
for like a light or a clock or something.
Up at where the top of the bookcase would have been. And so we kind of know the dimensions of the bookcase that was there originally, and eventually there will be a cabinet built to put back into that spot. Right now it has been, Robert did patch the wallboard and insulate. And so it's just painted now. He wasn't going to paint at first, he was just going to leave the space open to put the bookcase. And then it was like, why not just paint this? It's not that much more wall, just have it painted and then, and have it finished, nicely finished the whole way. So that, when time gets away from us and we still don't have the cabinet there.
When 3 years pass. And
Exactly.
Well, I know when we talked in the past about the cabinet, you were talking about having someone come and build it and the moldings and whatnot. And I'm just going to put a plug in here. I know, Kelly, we've talked about this before, but, my brother is an expert on all of this about design and architectural detailing and whatnot. And I know he sent Robert a copy of this book, but there's he gave me a copy too. It's an excellent book called Get Your House Right, Architectural Elements to Use and Avoid. And it's written by Marianne Casado and Ben Pentreath. And the foreword is by the Prince of Wales. But it's an excellent book if you have a traditional home to understand, if you have columns and the size of the columns and the proportions and also placement of fireplaces. I know like a lot of times with new construction, the fireplace, because it's not a real wood burning fireplace anymore. We are just putting like a gas. Mm-hmm. It just actually hangs off the side of the house, and there's actually in here, there's like a drawing of that with an X through it. You're not supposed to do that, and how you can, even with new architecture, how you can weight things and balance things. And it's to make your house look better, the ways to, and so it's an excellent book. So we can put a link in the show notes about that book. So anybody that's doing any kind of remodeling or repair work to a modern house or a traditional house. It's a great resource.
Yeah, it was really helpful when we did the addition when we were first living here. And it was interesting because the back of the house is very plain and the front of the house is not plain at all. Mm-hmm. And so there's a large molding that goes around the front of the house, on the outside exterior molding that goes around. I don't even know if it's called molding. It's so big. But it's the same idea. It's just a larger scale on the outside of the house. Anyway, there was nothing on the back of the house. And based on the book and then also, conversations with Mark, when we had the addition done for Aunt Betty's room, that's on the back of the house, they actually put that same molding. They, made a duplicate and put that same molding. So now it runs all the way around the house. It doesn't just stop like a facade, which is the way it was before. It was, just the front of the house was what had the detail. So, so I know that was a good resource for that particular time.
The other thing I would say that's really good about the book is so then you know what words to use to describe what you want.
Yes,
like I know I want this thing there, but what's that thing called? Well, it's a cornice or it's a whatever. Like it gives you the what's that when Mark's always talking about a dado? Like I had to figure out what a dado was, but anyway, which now don't ask me what it is. I can't remember off the top of my head. But anyway, so
all the vocabulary.
Yeah, you learn the vocabulary. Yeah,
and so getting back to knitting, I'll go ahead and talk about my basically one project first because it is true that if you have a little bit of knowledge about something, you can see design elements and know like, okay, this would be a good thing to add or subtract. Where if you don't have knowledge about it, it's like you don't even know to look.
Yeah.
Right. So I want to talk a little bit about that with my stripes on this sweater that I'm working on now. So, but I don't want to stop you if there was something else you wanted to say about that.
No, I think we're done. It's a knitting and fiber arts podcast, not a architectural order podcast.
Okay.
Okay. So do you want to talk about your projects?
Yes. So just to segue in, I'm working on the pullover and I'm using, the pattern is called Rachel and it's by Jose Paquin. I have the name in the show notes. And I've been using the name when I link to it on Ravelry because there are so many things called Rachel on Ravelry that when you do, on Ravelry, when you're talking about in the forum and you want to link to the pattern, you use the brackets and the parentheses. When I do that, I can never get it to come up.
Oh, because there's so many?
Yeah. Because I think because there's so many other things called Rachel. So I always just put in Rachel and put in designer's name. But I'm also using the striping pattern that she has in another pattern that I bought of hers called Fresh. So both Rachel and Fresh are by the same designer. and Fresh had the striping pattern. And I've modified it a little bit. And that's what I wanted to kind of talk about. Like, what did I think about when I modified it? Well, what I thought about when I modified it was Fibonacci.
Mm.
Yes,
Fibonacci.
my favorite mathematical sequence. So when I looked at the pattern, I found there were stripes. There were stripes that were 8 rows. There were, and then there were some sort of stripes that were alternating, like color work, like one color alternating with another color along the whole row. So those were like 1 row stripes. And so I had to end up adding some color. And then there were some 2 row stripes. I ended up having to add color between the stripes because of contrast. So I have the main color of the sweater is this deep green. It's Yak Lux by Invictus Yarns, and the colorway is called Nevermore. And then the contrast color is the NoCKRs Retreat yarn, which is a lighter color of teal. So the second contrast color is Vivid Wool. That's the one from Iceland. But they're so close that putting those 2 stripes together, I think I said this last time, putting those 2 stripes together just gave me one big block that almost looked like the same color, except like the variegation was not uniform. So I decided to put a 2-stripe main color between them. So it goes teal, light teal, dark green, variegated teal, dark green. And then we have the dark green, variegated teal, dark green, variegated teal, dark green in small stripes. So 2 big stripes with a contrast color between them, and then little stripes with a contrast color
I'm looking at it
between them. Yeah.
So which is the vivid wool? Is that the lighter sort of in the picture, the kind of pale blue kind?
Yeah, the one that looks like it has white in it when you look in one of the pictures. Yeah. So one of the things that I did was because I needed to have a contrast color between the 2, or the main color between the 2 contrast colors, I decided to use a 2 row stripe. That's a Fibonacci number. 8, which was already in the pattern, is also a Fibonacci number. And so then that made me think, okay, I'm going to just use Fibonacci numbers in these stripes. So the pattern called for skinnier, there's the 2 wide stripes, 2 8-row stripes, and then there's some skinnier stripes. The original pattern called for those skinny stripes to be, I think, all of them being 2 rows, and I decided I wanted them not to all be the same, so I used a 3-row stripe, also a Fibonacci number. So then that striping sequence is over, and you go back to the main color, and you have a large block of the main color with 3 rows of the alternating stitch. 1 stitch green, 1 stitch teal, 1 stitch green, 1 stitch teal. So again, 3 is a Fibonacci number.
So I'm looking at the picture. That's just that single row of the light colored.
Yeah,
but it's so you
have the big dark green block, and then you have those little speckly rows.
Yeah,
that
the speckly row is your alternating stitches with the light and the dark. Okay, got it.
Yeah, and it creates like a row of dots essentially.
Yeah,
and so I have 3 rows of dots. And so those rows of dots are all just 1 row, 1 round of knitting. And then in between them, I have another Fibonacci number, which is 5 rows. But before they start, I have a Fibonacci number, which is 13, because I wanted there to be a little bit of asymmetry. So I put 13 rows, and then I started the speckly rows. I think I'm not making any sense now.
I think when people listen to this, they just need to go look at your.
Usually, yes, because I am not describing this very well. But in the pattern, the original pattern, those speckly rows, the 1 row of alternating, they're like centered in a big block of the main color.
Okay.
And instead of centering them in the big block of the main color, I actually shifted them down to the bottom
Okay.
Like more toward the bottom of
Got
that
it.
block
I see.
of
Yeah.
green color.
Yeah.
So I used all Fibonacci numbers, and I should probably tell people, in case they don't know, not assume that everybody knows what a Fibonacci sequence is. But you start with the number 1, and the next number in the sequence is also 1, and then you add those two together, so 1 and 1, and that gives you the next number in the sequence, which is 2.
Mm-hmm.
So now your sequence is 1, 1, 2. And so you take the last two numbers in the sequence and you add them together, and that gives you the next number in the sequence. So
I'm sorry, so the last number. Oh, I'm sorry.
So this is why
I'm writing this down.
This
Kelly.
is why math online is so difficult, because I'm waving my hands around. If I could be writing on a chalkboard, it would be much better. Mm-hmm. So the sequence is 1, 1. Mm-hmm. You add those two together and you get 2. So now you take the last two numbers in your sequence. Your sequence is 1, 1, 2. So you take the 1 and the 2 and add it together.
Oh, it's 3.
You get 3. So now your sequence is 1, 1, 2, 3. So now you take the last two numbers in that list and add them together.
Which is 5.
So 2 and 3 gives you 5. Mm-hmm.
I'm doing this right? Okay.
Mm-hmm. And now if you look at that list that you have, the last two numbers that you have on your list are 3 and 5.
Okay.
And that's 8.
8, okay.
And then if you add the last two numbers on that list, it's the 8 that you just calculated and the 5 that you had before, and that's 13.
Okay. And that just keeps going on and on?
It goes on and on, but if you keep going too far, it gets a little unwieldy for a knitting
project. Yeah.
Because then you have 21 rows, and that's too much. So I have the Fibonacci numbers 8, 2, 3, 5, and 13. I did not say them in order. I'm looking at my pattern.
Okay.
But anyway, all those numbers are on the list, not in that order, but all those numbers are on the list of Fibonacci numbers. Okay. And that just gives me confidence that my stripes are going to look balanced. Mm-hmm. Would anybody look at it and go, oh my God, you have a 6-row stripe? That is terrible. Like, probably not. Mm-hmm. But there's just something reassuring to me about using the Fibonacci numbers to describe, to choose my stripe widths, because I know that through history they have been used to create balanced design. So, sort of like the things in that book.
So what's my grade am I going to get for?
It's a pandemic, Marsha. Nobody's getting grades.
Oh, okay.
That's not true.
Oh my God, so funny. Okay.
So I'm really enjoying knitting the sweater. This yarn is really luscious to knit with. Is the Invictus Yak Luxe, and then the Vivid Wool Merino fingering. And I have it on slippery needles. It's slippery yarn. I'm just really enjoying the pattern. The stripes are really addictive. So yeah.
I'm just going to step back a little bit about the Fibonacci sequence. This is great to have. If you just have, if you get just a plain, let me go back. I have some yarn that I bought at the Goodwill. I don't have enough. It's all the same brand of yarn, but just different colorways. And I don't have enough for an entire sweater. Mm-hmm. But I was thinking, well, if you do the Fibonacci sequence, I could just get just a basic pattern for a pullover or something, and then just like you're doing, sort of, you based it on the designer's design, but then you also just modified it. You could just take a plain basic sweater and do Fibonacci sequence and have a really
I did that on my I think it's called Falling Water. Mm-hmm. The sweater, the cashmere cardigan that I made.
Oh, right, yeah.
At the very bottom of that, let me just go look at it for a second. At the very bottom of that sweater, I have a set of stripes. that I did using the Fibonacci sequence. Running Water is the name of the sweater. And so at the very bottom of the sweater, I just did Fibonacci stripes, starting with just a 1-row stripe, and then another 1-row stripe, and then a 2-row stripe, and then a 3-row stripe. And, in between each of the stripes was, I think, 2 rows of the original main color. And I did that because I didn't have enough yarn. The cashmere, I didn't have enough. It was a cone that I bought on sale, and it wasn't enough to make the long sweater that I wanted, but it was definitely enough when I striped it with the chickadee. And then I did the same stripe, smaller, not as many stripes on one sleeve of that sweater. And I love that sweater. And I think the stripe sequence looks really nice. And I did not create that. Right? That's not my artistic ability. That's just, oh, this is easy. Let's just do Fibonacci stripes. So I think it's a great tool. And it's not hard. And I think the things that are in that, the techniques or the strategies that are in that house book, there's nothing in there that's like mind-boggling. Like, wow, I never would have thought that.
Right.
If you are familiar with those tools. It's not things that are really hard or like really necessarily really expensive. Well, all construction is expensive, but
right.
It's not like doing those things or using those techniques or using those design elements is more work or harder than anything else. It's just you wouldn't even know.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Anyway, but that's it. That's really all my knitting is this sweater.
Okay.
I did finish the green socks out of the yarns from the plane, that emerald green color. So I finished those socks. But yeah, I've been very monogamously Fibonacci striping.
Well, I have a finished project.
Yay.
Yay! But they are not worth a bottle of champagne because it's a pair of socks. That doesn't count as a bottle.
Yeah, like mine.
Yeah. Anyway, I finished the Arne and Carlos socks I was making for my brother in Pairfect.
Oh, good.
And and so
do they match exactly?
They almost exactly. When you do the you do the heel. I just do those. I call them vanilla socks, but it's just the top down. You do the heel flap,
gusset. Yeah.
Turn the heel, gusset. When you finish on the first one, when I finished the gusset, I had one. No, wait a minute. I take that back. Oh, I don't have them anymore. I gave them to him. There's 1 row of red in there, and I think what happened is my heel flap probably was 1 row shorter or longer or something, or picking up stitches or something that on the second one, that red is in another place. I'm not, now I'm waving my hands around and not explaining it very well, but they match exactly except for this 1 row on the arch of the foot where all that, the gusset ends. And anyway,
I think it would be easy to go an extra row or pick up an extra stitch or even just have a different gauge as you're picking up those stitches and get off in that area.
Yeah. So, but the thing is, I mean, I don't care one way or the other. I look like they don't match perfectly. That's okay. It doesn't matter to me. Cause no one's going to be looking at his feet that closely.
Yeah.
If they are, there's something wrong with them.
Right. And they're going to be picky about it.
He's not picky, and they're in his shoes. Right. So, no one's, it's not a big deal at all. And if he was,
he wouldn't be getting hand socks from you.
But it's interesting I'm just going to make a note about colors, though, because they're very bright. They have these very bright reds and oranges and a blue. The blue is actually quite bright, like a bright robin's egg blue kind of, It does not photograph that way at all. It And all the photographs I've taken of it, it looks very grayed, and it's really not. But there's something about color and photographing it that it just doesn't show up. And so much so that even I talked about this before, but the photograph of the socks on the label of the yarn band looks gray.
Yeah.
And because it's one of those balls of yarn that you can't see all of the colors, you just see the outside color. I bought it thinking it was gray, not realizing it was this bright blue. And I was so happy when I pulled it out and got to that point and realized it was much brighter blue than what was shown in the photograph. So, anyway.
The brown sweater that I just made, the Thea Coleman, and I can't even remember what the name of that, Dark and Stormy. That sweater, I could not for the life of me ever get a picture that captured its actual color. Sometimes when I would photograph it, almost always when I photograph it, it comes out lighter. It comes out like a kind of a honeyed color brown, kind of a golden brown. And it does have that kind of golden highlight to it, but not nearly as much as what it comes out in the photographs. And then other times when I could get rid of that sort of light sheen all over it that made it look kind of gold, it would be too dark. And I don't think I have one picture, either on Instagram or Ravelry, of that sweater that actually shows the real color of that handspun yarn.
Yeah.
It's strange how some colors don't photograph well, and also some yarns. I think because of the texture of them or something. They just
I wonder
don't
if it's,
well.
now I know your sweater is not blue, but the other one that I made was a Little Wave, Gudrun Johnson or something. I made that, and I made it out of Neighborhood Fiber Company and kind of in a blue.
Yeah.
Like a faded denim blue kind of, It always looks gray in the photographs. So it could be certain colors, blues, and maybe certain, like you were dealing with a shade of brown, they don't photograph well. I don't know. Interesting. I'm sure there's
definitely depends on the background because I do know I have a couple of different places where I typically take pictures for Instagram or Ravelry of my projects if I want to just, really show the project and not just have it like bunched on my lap or something. And one of them is the sort of dark slate gray of that coffee table in the sunroom. Sometimes I'll use the bed in the spare room, which has a beige quilt on it. Sometimes I'll use the rust-colored couch. And like all of them give different results. And sometimes if I don't like the way it's photographing, I'll change the background, go to a darker or lighter background to see if I can get a better result. But yeah, with that brown sweater, it didn't matter where I took a picture of it. I could never get the right color.
Okay, so, and then I will talk about my Holey Comfort cardigan, but I'm just going to wait on that for 1 second to say, because I got stuck on my Holey Comfort, I cast on socks for myself.
Oh, nice.
And I'm using sock yarn from the NoCKRs retreat. I think the first year that we went crazy in the destash room. I think I got it that year. And it's Tilli Tomas Artisan Sock in the colorway called Coconut Grove. And I got it out, and I looked it up on Ravelry, and it's discontinued. I'm assuming Tilli Tomas is a woman, is not making any yarn at all anymore. And
that yarn brand was the brand that was used for the swirl sweater. Remember the swirl sweater that I wanted to make that looked like it was somebody's wedding?
Oh, right.
Wedding coat. That was the yarn brand that was used for that swirl sweater, not the sock yarn. It was a yarn that it was like a silk with beads or sequins or something. That sounds familiar. I mean, I would have, if I could have afforded that yarn, when I went to look at it, it was so expensive. Plus, do I need a wedding coat? No.
Well, I have to tell you, this yarn, when I picked it up because I thought it was so ugly. Because the colors are so weird. It was not colors I would ever combine. So it's red, like a Christmas red, kind of. turquoisey teal, like a dark teal, a light teal, and then a gradation of that teal, but it's not white, but it's like a really, really pale blue teal.
Yeah.
And I would never, like with dyeing, I know with dyeing, it's really hard to put red and greens together and not get brown or something muddy, right? So now that I've been dyeing, I actually have an appreciation for this yarn, how there's no muddiness to this at all.
Yeah, I just went to look at your project page. I remember that yarn. That is really cool.
So, and I think in my project page, I think I posted a picture of the yarn just spread out before I wound it into the cake. And I remember somebody at the NoCKRs retreat said, that is so ugly, you should just go put it back in. But it knits up beautifully.
You can see in the yarn that it has actually very distinct breaks between the colors.
Yeah. And I don't think you can see in the picture. I'll have to post a picture of the finished sock. It's very definite stripes, and it's a nice yarn. It's too bad it's discontinued because I like knitting with it, and I really like the colors now. So it's, we've talked about this before about something that you reject, but then I really like the colors now. But in the skein, I remember I picked it up like, this is such ugly yarn. I wonder what you can do with it. Well, just knit with it. It's actually quite nice. Yeah.
We had a project like that in my weaving class that we were supposed to go into the cabinet and get something that we consider to be ugly and then make something with it. And I never actually it turned out I never did that actual project, but I did pick out a yarn that I thought was really ugly and took the yarn home and I had it on the shelf, and I was cleaning up and I stuck it in this bowl. It was like a chartreusey acidy green, and I stuck it in this bowl that was kind of neutral colors, a little bit to the orange, beige and orange, kind of clay colored. It was like, as soon as I stuck it in that bowl, it was like, oh my God, that yarn is beautiful. And this is what I need to put it with if I were to make a project. And so what I did for the assignment was I just brought the yarn in the bowl to the class to talk about how the yarn looks so much better to me once I put it in the bowl. I didn't actually make anything with it, but yeah, it is kind of amazing. If you just change your perspective on something just a little bit. Yeah.
So, okay. But now I have to talk about Holey Comfort. So as I talked about in the last episode, I talked about how I was running out of yarn. I was like, I'm so perplexed by this. And because the pattern calls for my size calls for around 1,500 yards. It's actually 1,515. So let's say 1,500 yards. And I had 1,600 yards. Like, why am I running? So I had knit down to sort of not even, like just a slightly above hip length, because I want the sweater to be about hip length, with the band on there. And I was almost there, and I had another 4 repeats to do of the pattern before I would even start 2 inches of the border. So I'm like, well, if I continue, it's going to be down, to my knees practically, or mid-thigh, like, or just above my knees. Like, I don't understand. So I thought, well, I'll just go move on to the sleeve till I figure this out. And so I now am 3/4 of the way through the sleeve, or less than 3/4 of the way through the sleeve, and I'm running yarn. I guess I'm 3/4 and I'm running out of yarn. Plus, I have a lot more to knit on the sleeve before I start doing the cuff. So that if I follow the pattern, the sleeves are going to be way too long. So Kelly and I had a discussion about this, and I actually checked my row gauge, because my gauge is correct for stitches per inch on, for stitches, but my row gauge, I'm supposed to get 35 rows per 4 inches. Wait a minute. I realize here, it doesn't matter. Anyway, 35 inches in 4 inches, and I'm getting 37. And I think it's that's why I'm using up so much yarn, is because the sweater is not just straight down, it's A-line. So every, and I don't have my notes here in front of me, but I think it's like
every 4 inches, you're doing an additional 2 rows, right?
Yes. So I think so, because every 6 rows, I do increase on one stitch increase on the left front, and the right front. And every 10 rows, I do 2 increases on the back.
Yeah, so it's getting
bigger and bigger as it goes down, and that means you're using more and more yarn.
Yes, and your gauge, you're doing an additional 2 rows in every 4 inches.
Yeah,
of your sweater. Wow. Yeah.
So I've been knitting for a long time, and I know listeners seem to think that we're experts. We have fooled you all these years, because I know intellectually that row gauge matters, but I hardly ever check row gauge.
Yeah.
Honestly, don't. And this, I have learned my lesson that, I've learned my lesson that I need to check row gauge and take it seriously. And I feel how I'm just going to fully admit how dumb this was, what I did, that I don't check row gauge, is we went to an entire class at the NoCKRs retreat about gauge, talking about stitches per inch and also the row gauge. Yes. So bad on me. That's my own fault. So anyway, just funny, but things we don't do that we should do. We learn the hard way, like alternating skeins is another thing. Nobody ever regretted alternating skeins, and I think probably nobody ever regretted checking their row gauge. Mm-hmm. So,
well, and not that you would need to have done anything different in terms of your knitting, like you wouldn't necessarily have changed your needle size because you were already getting the stitch gauge, but you would have known that every pattern repeat is going to give you a different size than what. And I would have ordered more. I would have got more yarn to begin with, or realized my problem and ordered more right away. The other thing is my concern now is the sleeves, because they're not, they seem to be fine up at the armhole, but as I'm going down further and further, I'm wondering if I'm not decreasing fast enough, so that when I get down to where the cuff, I'm going to have really the stitch, the stitches per inch around the cuff is really what should have been up around the elbow or something, So I know I have to do some. Try it on and see.
To do some deep thinking about this. Now, the length of it, I like the length of it where it is now, and that's why I stopped, because I have to allow, I think it's 2 or about 2 inches for the bottom band, because I don't want to have a really super long cardigan. But but I realized, well, I'm missing. I now I don't remember. I have my notes are, but it's like 28 stitches I'm missing that are not going to be in there because I'm not going to finish the all those increases for the full pattern. But it doesn't seem to be a problem because it is A-line, so it's not it wraps around me just fine. Yeah. It's a sort of unconstructed, no buttons or anything, so it seems like that fits fine. So I'm not worried about that. But I we were talking about this, and Nitty Barb is also made it. And she actually, on the forum, she actually posted that she actually finished hers. And she was actually using, she says, mine is done and my row gauge is all over the place. So she had issues with row gauge too.
Interesting.
And she says she used Holstgard Coast Old Bromold. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I know I'm not. And she says it's listed as a light fingering, but really leans towards lace weight. She says, I just kept trying it on. I'm still not sure the length of the body is right. I did have to pull out about 4 inches on both sleeve cuffs and reknit as it grew so much after blocking.
Wow. Okay. So she was getting it longer. I mean, after blocking, but having it be longer than it then it.
But it's interesting that she's using lace weight and I used, what am I using? Sport. I mean, there's a significant difference between those two. But anyway, also Knitty Barb, I have to say, because if she listens, I'm impressed. 932 projects. I'm impressed. So
that's
anyway,
a lot of projects.
That's a lot of projects. Yeah. I'm impressed by that. Anyway, so that's it for my projects.
Okay. So do you have a new picture of your sweater? No, you don't. You have the same sweater. It's the same picture.
Does it have a sleeve on it?
No.
Okay. I'll post a picture of it. I'll update it with the sleeve.
Yeah. I was just curious because I wanted to see what it was going to look like.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty sweater, and I think I'd like to make it. But I will check my row gauge.
Yeah, that was...
There's only been 2 times where I really had to worry, where I really thought and purposefully thought about row gauge. And one was when we made the swirl sweater. Mm-hmm. Because of the way the sleeves are made, the row gauge was important for the width of the sleeve, for the sleeve not to be too tight.
Yeah.
And then the other one was the sweater that I made that I think I made it last summer when my foot was broken. It's that pink sweater that I made out of the cicada. Mm-hmm. Awesome, I think it's called. Awesome. How do you pronounce that, Marsha? That's the T. ASSAM. Do you know?
Oh, Assam.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And that one.
I say that with such confidence. I don't know.
Well,
I think that's how it's pronounced.
That sounds right. And it's knit sideways. And so the row gauge was important to make sure that it was actually going to fit. Mm-hmm. But those are the only 2 times where I've really paid attention. Honestly, I'm like you. It's like, I'll just make it till the length is right.
Yeah. So, yeah, I learned my lesson.
When I've had to do recalculations for stitch gauge, I have done calculations with row gauge too, though. Mm-hmm. Like if I'm using a smaller yarn or a bigger yarn, and I know I'm going to have to change my stitch counts, then I've also changed my row counts. If the pattern says do this many rows instead of do this many inches.
Yeah.
But most of the patterns that I use, it's about how many inches you do. Mm-hmm. Knit this for this many inches. But if you have pattern repeats, just thinking about the times where it would be important to think about row gauge. If you have pattern repeats, you have to complete a pattern repeat. And if your pattern repeat is longer or shorter than the pattern calls for, it's something to think about. Mm-hmm. Oh my God. Honestly, when you think about it, it's amazing anybody ever makes anything that fits.
Well, to quote Robert, are you ever going to make me something that fits or whatever? That's not a direct quote. It was something like
he used to say that about my socks. When are you going to be good enough at this that you know what size they're going to be when they're done?
Oh my God. So funny. Yeah. Anyway.
I think I'm that good now. I know what size my socks are going to be when they're done.
Yeah.
But sweaters, it's sort of, honestly, it is kind of I won't say it's a crapshoot because you do have some ability to know, but you can't always, there's a lot of adjusting going on that needs, that you kind of have to be ready to do on the fly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of an educated guess.
Yeah. Like this sweater, one of the things in the pattern, it said to go from the top, where your cast on edges at the top of the shoulder, go down 6.5 inches and put it on waste yarn. And then you go down 6.5 inches on both of the fronts and put those on waste yarn. And then you join them, join them. Join the sleeves. I'm sorry. You guys all know from many, many episodes, my armholes cannot be 6.5 inches deep for my, for my size. That is just, that's pretty standard in patterns, but that is not the size of my arms.
Yeah.
So I went down another 2 inches, which might be a little extreme, but I like to have a little bit of space.
Mm-hmm. So Kelly, let's talk about the weaving winter long. No. The winter weave along. Thank you.
That's funny. So starting November 1st, which is tomorrow. Yay. Starting November 1st starts our winter weave along, and weave a project. Weave several projects. It goes on until March 31st. So all winter and a little bit barely into spring if you're in the northern hemisphere. And we're just going to do all kinds of weaving, and we're going to talk about weaving. And, we won't be talking all weaving all the time on the podcast, but there will be a forum thread up for weaving chat, and there will be some finished object threads, and we'll have some prizes along the way and at the end. And yeah, just an opportunity to shift a little bit of focus away from knitting and onto weaving. So yeah, I'm excited about it. I'm here popping in with some breaking news that I got yesterday after we recorded. Very exciting. Erica, who has Weavolution, the website for weavers, has offered a class. So she has a class on offer for one of the prizes of the Winter Weave Along. And I also wanted to encourage you to check out her website, Weavolution. It has projects and classes and discussion forums. And I used to go on Weavolution quite a bit when I was first starting as a weaver. And I would read some of the discussions, and I got a lot of good feedback. That was quite a while ago, and Erica has made a lot of really nice changes to the website. So I encourage you to go look at Weavolution, Weavolution, Weavolution. You can find that website. It's really pretty fun. And thank you, Erica, for offering a prize for our winter weave along. I don't have my looms put back into the studio yet, but I am going to. I think I'm going to put the floor loom, the small, the floor loom that's smaller than the gigantic behemoth that's in the garage is going back in the studio, and I think I'm going to set up a table with the table loom in there too. For now, just one of our portable 6-foot tables. I'll just bring it in there and set that up with the table loom, because I think I'd like to do a table loom project. And then my floor loom project that I'm thinking about is using some skeins of yarn that, again, how I always say I just kind of move skeins around until something looks like it goes together. I've got 3 skeins that all have a kind of a turquoise color to them. 2 of them have turquoise and kind of rust. And then there's the Tasmanian Comeback, which is a little different from the other skeins in terms of texture, but I think it might be okay. It's a rust color, pumpkin color. So, and then I have one of the skeins is solid teal. So 2 variegateds that are similar colorways, but not identical. A solid rust and then a kind of tonal teal. They're all 3 plies. Oh no, the Tasmanian Comeback is only a 2-ply. The others are 3 plies, and they are all kind of silky. The Targhee doesn't have any silk in it. The 2 variegated ones, I think both have silk in them. And then the Tasmanian Comeback does not. But the colors go really well together. They're all about the same size. I think I'm going to use them for warp. But I don't quite have enough. And I am going to put a link in the show notes to a couple of tools that you can use for seeing if you have enough yarn. One is just a quick and dirty method from Jane Stafford. It's like 1 paragraph long. And then the other one is a PDF that she has called Project Planning 101. Breaking in again, just to let people know that Weaveolution also has a weaving calculator that you can use to help determine whether you have enough yarn or how much yarn that you'll need for a particular project. I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. So anyway, I've done the calculations, and yeah, I don't quite have enough. So I've been trying to think what I want to do. Do I want to use these as warp and then figure out something else to do as weft? Do I want to spin another one? I do have a gray. I think the gray is pole or silk. Do I want to dye that gray? But it's such a silvery gray, and these are also warm, kind of autumnal colors, that I'm not sure that dyeing that gray would give me a color that I really wanted. Yeah. You know, the undertone of it would be so cool. So I don't know how I'm going to resolve this, but I think I might just wind the warp and then figure out what to do with the weft. And one tip for people, if you are going to use multiple different kinds of yarn in your warp, different yarn brands, or like when you're doing using hand spun, different breeds, it's helpful to not have large bands of one color or one yarn because they shrink differently. Oh, so yeah, you'll often get unevenness either in if it's in your warp, you'll get unevenness in the length of whatever you weave. And if it's in your weft, you'll get like pull in. Sometimes you'll have more pull in one band of color than another. Yeah. Kind of like gauge. If you are using 2 different yarns for like a big wrap, and you got a different gauge with each yarn, you would definitely see that in the end result if you did them in big, in color blocks. But if you alternated them or did, 2 and 1 or, 2 and 3 or something like that, then you have much less of that problem. So I don't intend to do stripes per se, like color block stripes or like a plaid. I think I'll just intersperse the 2 solids into the 2 variegateds and get a warp that way. So I'm thinking I might wind that warp and then just worry about the weft. Maybe spinning for the weft, or I guess I could use a commercial yarn, but kind of be nice to have a hand spun. This is for a blanket. I don't think I ever said what I was going to make with it. A small lap blanket. And I think I'll use it. My plan is to use it for the bedroom. Because right now in the evenings when I'm cold, I have a flannel blanket that my mom gave me from her hope chest. That was my blanket when I was a baby. Which is kind of cool. It's this little patchwork flannel blanket. It's kind of cool that I still, at age 59, have it, I have my baby blanket. I don't remember it. It wasn't something I carried around or anything. I didn't really do that as a child. My sister was the one that had the favorite blanket. But it'd be kind of nice to have something, that kind of matched the bedroom and wasn't a ratty old baby blanket.
It was in your mother's hope chest. So you have a hope chest before you get married, right? Yeah. And she stored it in. She stored it in there. I don't know that it was in her hope chest before I was. Oh, okay. But that she was cleaning out a number of years ago. She was cleaning out, everything she had stored of ours from when we were kids, and giving them away to us because she didn't want. She was purging like you're doing. Yeah.
And
we're not even going to talk about that in this podcast.
Okay. We'll leave that subject for another
That's a
day.
whole other podcast. Yeah.
Right. So anyway, that's my plan for this blanket, is to have something that looks good and matches the bedroom. And, it's kind of soft, it'll still be wool. So I may opt for the flannel baby blanket around my neck some nights, but a little lap blanket would be kind of nice. So
nice.
That's the first project that I'm thinking about. And then the other thing that I was thinking about, besides the yarn that you have sent me, the Gotland, to make your blanket. I haven't forgot about that. Don't worry.
I didn't want to ask, but because I don't want to pressure, but it's like, anyway.
I know last year you said, you can work on that. And I really thought I might get to it, but it just didn't happen. I didn't weave very much in the weave along last year.
I also have to say too, there's nothing worse than having somebody pressure you to do a project. Like, we've talked about this, that any of our projects, we have to be sort of inspired to start it. And the idea that something that we have to do sort of makes it not fun anymore, But anyway, that's just a side note. So that's why I'm not going to say anything about it, Kelly.
Okay. But one of the other things that I was thinking of is that I think I might like to buy a kit. I typically weave from my stash, and a good part of my stash is stuff I've gotten from destash. So it's really a hodgepodge. I mean, there's a lot of coned yarn, but it's really a hodgepodge. And so, I don't mind doing that. It's kind of fun to be, again, we've talked a lot about design in this episode, but having the constraint of you have to use what you have kind of is a nice way to think about design. It kind of having those boundaries around something, just like having the Fibonacci sequence as the boundaries for how big your stripes are going to be. Yeah. It helps. And so I don't mind doing that, where I look through my stash, or I'll just grab a bunch of colors that I think go together, and then I'll just use them until they're gone, and then I'll sub in something else. And I think I like the dish towels that I've made. I think they've turned out really, really good. But it might be kind of fun to buy a kit and get exactly what the picture is on the pattern. Be able to do this design and know you'd have enough yarn for the design. You wouldn't have to sub something in or make an adjustment, or like, oh wow, it's supposed to have this width of stripe, but I don't have enough, so let's make the stripes a little smaller. It'd just be kind of nice not to have to do that. So So I've been looking at kits, and I'm going to have a link in the show notes to some websites that have weaving supplies and then also have kits. So Webb's has kits, not very many, mostly dish towels and a couple of wraps. But what worth taking a look at the Webb's website if you're interested in kits. And then the two that have a lot of choices are Yarn Barn of Kansas. And they even have one, I didn't go and dig down into it, but they have a holiday themed kits. And I thought, that might be kind of interesting to take a look at. The other thing about the kits is they're kind of inspiring too, for me to think, I could put those colors that are in my stash together. When you see the picture of the finished object, or you see the collection of yarns, you might get some ideas for yarns you already have. Yeah. So, and then the other website that has weaving kits is Halcyon Yarns. And so we have a link to all three of those in the show notes.
Nice. Any more about winter weave along?
No, I won't pressure you to ask you if you're going to weave anything.
Well, as you were talking, I was thinking about it.
And seriously, Marsha, no pressure. Again, same reason.
Well, it's been a little hectic around here. As I've talked about before, I live in one house, but I have another house that I need to get ready to rent. It was standing empty. Then my son and his girlfriend were living in it over the summer. Ben is still there, but my goal is to get it rented in the month of January. So we've cleared everything out pretty much, just the things that, this is a whole nother podcast about getting rid of things that are in a house that you lived in for 25 years, that you raised a family in, and you go through a divorce, but your ex-husband doesn't take his things for 4 years. That is a whole nother podcast. Anyway.
we should do that podcast someday.
Yes. Anyway, so Paul bought a house in March, right when the pandemic hit. So it was like March or April or something. He bought a house. And so he's been slowly getting these things out. Finally, I dropped the last of his stuff off last week. Just loaded up the car and put it in his garage. So that's good. And so now we are going to start painting and get the house. We have to do a lot of work because, it's not been painted inside for years. So we have to do all this stuff. So my goal is to get all that done November, December, so we can get the house rented in January. And then I will just be down to one house that I have to care for. Mm-hmm. And then I can start just really enjoying spending time planning projects and stuff because, and then I have the loom that you loaned me. I have that downstairs and I keep moving it around as I'm moving things around. And every day I think I got to do something with it. So I am sort of inspired to do something for the winter weave along. We did the one weaving project. You showed me how to set it up. And as you were talking about the kits, I was thinking that might be a good thing for me. Well, I have to look at the kits. I don't know how complicated they are, but it might be nice that I would not have to think too hard about setting up the warp, and I would know I would have enough. And I don't know, maybe I should just do a simple placemat project or something is what I was thinking.
Yeah. Well, and they have the Yarn Barn site. The other ones probably do too. The Yarn Barn site is the one that I was looking at the most. They have a variety of projects. So they have some projects that are more complicated. Mm-hmm. Some projects for 8-shaft looms. Other projects are for 4-shaft looms. They have projects for rigid heddle looms. So there's a really wide variety, and yeah, you could pick something that was relatively simple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that I would like to make some just placemats, 6 placemats or something like that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I saw a table runner that I liked, a Christmas it was on Christmas because it's red and white table runner that I thought, that would be kind of fun to make. Yeah. So, but yeah, that would maybe be a good choice for you because also it just gives you the yarn you need. Mm-hmm. As opposed to, having to buy several cones of different colors for.
Well, I wasn't going to talk about this, but I'm just going to say something. I have been collecting all the spirit yarn. You know how we always have this conversation, and I've been collecting spirit yarn because I was going to make an Afghan for my brother, that garter squish Afghan. And the other day, I suddenly thought to myself, it was a very difficult day for me. And I thought, I'm sick of cleaning. I'm sick of this. And I've been in my house and I just came home from walking the dog and I thought, I'm going to go down here. I'm going to pull that yarn out and I'm going to start dyeing it. Well, you can't do that. You have to prep it, reskein it, soak it, blah, blah, blah. You have to do all this stuff and figure out how much. And I started looking at it and all of a sudden I just had this feeling. It's like, I just want to take all this back to the Goodwill. Mm-hmm. I want to get rid of all of it. And I have every year for Christmas, Paul, bless his heart, my ex-husband, even though I was so upset about leaving all that stuff in my house, he is a good guy. And every year he gives me a gift card to the Fiber Gallery. And so I have a lot of money there. And I thought, I should just take my brother over there and just let him pick the colors he wants for this Afghan that I'm going to make. And just start fresh, and just donate all that spirit yarn back
to the universe.
So someone else could, Or I thought maybe I should just, if we ever get to go to the NoCKRs retreat again, I could bring it down there. I could bring it to you to weave with, but you don't want it either, But I just I think in going back to the original discussion about the pandemic too, I'm beginning to sort of question some of the choices I made. It was a good idea at the time about making, but I'm beginning to question that now. It's feeling overwhelming and like it's too much. And I think I have too much on my plate. And so maybe just the idea is just I'm just going to buy yarn for that project, that Afghan that I'm supposed to make for my brother, and just clear my head about what am I going to do with all of that spirit yarn, It's not a bad thing. And so I am kind of inspired to do a weaving project, but I think maybe a kit is the way I need to go, so I don't have to feel a little overwhelmed by what am I going to use.
Right. Right. Because if you are going to do placemats, you're probably not going to use the yarn that you have, which is wool.
No. Yeah, I want cotton or linen but probably cotton. So, yeah. Well, that was a little bit of therapy right there. Okay. More about the turmoil in my...
We started with my therapy about my existential crisis and my career choice and vocation.
Yes, a little therapy. Yes, everybody has a little peek into the turmoil in my brain, But anyway. So, I'm kind of inspired and excited about it.
Yeah.
So I don't think my winter weave along will start until January, but
you can just read the posts and join the discussion and see what everybody else is doing and planning, and there'll be opportunities to learn. People who have not woven before, just like we had a lot of people who had not spun before. You can jump in and know that you have people there to help you.
Yeah. Okay, Kelly, I think that's the last thing we're going to talk about, and we're about ready to say goodbye.
Yes.
But guess what? We have a live finished project. I just finished the toes of my socks that I've been knitting on. So
all right, ring the bell.
I know, ring the bell. I just finished. So now I just finished, and now I've got my 10 stitches left. So I have to, do my Kitchener stitch. But nice. That's exciting. Yeah.
Very good.
So,
well, that's a good place to leave it. A little therapy on either end, plus the finished project.
I think we know the title of this podcast. All right.
All right.
All righty. We'll talk.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. To subscribe to the podcast, visit 2usfiberadventures.com.
Join us on our adventures on Ravelry and Instagram. I am Better in Motion, and Kelly is 100 Projects.
Until next time, we're the 2Us
doing our part for World Fleece.